Right, we're now joined via Zoom by Knox Msebenzi. He is the Managing Director for Nuclear Industry Association of South Africa. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Msebenzi. Thanks so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Well, it seems like we were perhaps lied to. Eskom said load shedding or blackouts are, done for now. Barely a week later, an announcement that we're pretty much back where we were. What exactly is the problem here? I mean, it's all quite technical for us and the layman to pretty much understand. And on the back of that, perhaps I can ask you: is it a simple question of changing the leadership at Eskom, as some have called for that?
I wouldn't go for such drastic actions. And I think name calling and finger pointing does not augur well for a country that needs to develop. I think we need to understand the genesis of the problem. There's been an acknowledgement that the forecast or the planning for the future energy supply was not done properly, partly because of the policy that said Eskom can no longer build new generation plant, and the government has admitted that they made that call and wanted to build new power stations. Countries that do well plan years ahead.
Yeah.
There are countries like China that plan 50 years ahead of time. What we are doing now is really crisis management. And I think what is important is for us to think about short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions. We cannot live for the next 100 years only based on short-term planning. We need to have all our things in the basket for the short-term, medium-term, and long-term.
Yeah, is this an issue mainly to do with infrastructure? We've been hearing a lot about the fact that, one of the biggest issues is that, the power plants were not really maintained, and that the main issue here is when we're talking about infrastructure, because, something needs to be fixed, and when that fixed, something else breaks. Is that what we're talking about here? What is the major problem? I think that's where I'm getting to.
Planning involves everything, including what are you going to do with your existing fleet. If you run a bus company, you plan to say, when my buses reach 500,000 kilometers, this is what I am going to do. I'm going to replace them. But if you are constrained in terms of doing that, say, don't worry, we will sort out other forms of transportation. Perhaps that put Eskom in a bit of a situation. So the point I am making is that as a nation, we need to sit back and plan and not point fingers, because pointing fingers will not solve the problem. We need to sit down and deal with this crisis so that we can look at short-term, medium-term, and long-term solutions.
Well,
and long-term solutions look at 20, 30 years from now.
Yeah. When we're talking about other solutions, I mean, could we be looking at alternative, energy sources? I mean, I've heard a lot of people talking about, perhaps getting off the grid. Might that be a way to unburden the situation? And certainly for those who can afford to do so, which isn't the majority of South Africans.
Well, certainly, we can no longer talk about alternative energy sources at the moment, because all forms of energy are already part of our energy mix.
Yeah.
There is no more what we call alternative energy sources. The issue is to come up with an energy mix that is good for the country, not necessarily the cheapest. The cheapest is not always the best solution, but we need to have a solution that is good for the country economically, and that makes sure that as a developing country, we make sure that poor people are not left behind in terms of access to electricity. So it's not an easy solution to say, oh, let's run away from coal, or let's do this and go for renewables or whatever. Let us be sober about how we approach the whole energy mix. We do have an independent resource plan which calls for all forms of energy to be put on the grid. We need to just implement that and stop fighting amongst ourselves in terms of saying, my technology is better than yours, therefore it must take precedence over the other. That is a thing of the past.
Well, Mr. Msebenzi, something that's not a thing of the past is, of course, the load shedding and the blackouts. Must we make peace with the fact that this is what we'll be dealing with for the foreseeable future? I mean, the fact that we heard last week that, we'd be okay for some time, and then a week later we're hearing a different story, surely means that we shouldn't necessarily believe anything that we hear. We should just make peace with the fact that, we're going to be faced with the blackouts or load shedding for the foreseeable future.
I like to believe that the people that are responsible for our power supply meant well when they said it would be a thing of the past. They wished it would be the thing of the past, but I guess it is beyond their control. As I said, what we need to do is to look at what our energy mix is like and what our plans are. We are in a crisis now. If we do not resolve these issues, 10 years from now, we will still be talking about the same thing. If we had done certain things 10 years ago, we would not be in this. Unfortunately, that we can no longer go back 10 years, but we must prevent the same debate and discussion happening 10 years from now. We must implement the IRP 2019, revise it if necessary, and not be burdened by all these squabbles about my technology is better than yours. I come from the nuclear industry. I will never want to say the only solution for South Africa is nuclear, although I believe nuclear can solve the problems. But I would like to believe that in a democratic state, we need to have all the people put their heads together and we put our brains together and find a solution which is good for the country, not good for the particular sector.
All right, Mr. Msebenzi, thank you very much for giving us your time here on SABC News. We certainly do appreciate it, sir.